Hello everyone, I'm Gabriel Silaghi and I'm excited to be moderating today's discussion on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is important today as much as any time, and every solution, platform, process, or activity in the organization should be embedded with cybersecurity in mind. This is built by design, and with me today we have our cybersecurity experts, Alexandra Scânteie and Nuno Silva, who I'm gonna allow to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Gabi, for the warm introduction. Hello, and hello, everybody. It's nice to be here with you today. My name is Alexandra Scânteie. I'm part of Modern Enterprise Services EMEA, and I'm the head of Cybersecurity and Network Unified Communication Services. Nuno?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Excited to be here. I'm Nuno Silva. I'm the Cybersecurity Portfolio Manager for Stefanini.
Pleasure to meet you all and have you here. Let's deep dive into our discussion. Alexandra, what are the key considerations when an organization should be implementing a cybersecurity solution or a platform?
That's a very good question. Actually, when implementing a new cybersecurity solution, you should take into account a couple of things. First and foremost, you need to align it with business objectives. You need to involve key stakeholders early, and you also need to establish clear goals and metrics for success. You also need to pay attention with integrating with the existing ecosystem, right? You need to think about scalability, and also you need to think about the regulatory landscape, so compliance, how the tool is going to fit in your environment. It also is vital for you to plan as continuous monitoring afterwards to make sure that once implemented, the technology that you've chosen gets updated so it stays abreast of the evolving threats, right? And it's still efficient within your organization. And don't forget about the tool, right? Because that's a common mistake that we also see. Once it's implemented, people tend to forget about it and think that miraculously it's going to get updated, it's going to, care for itself, and it doesn't work that way.
So, Nuno, how do you define and refine cybersecurity strategies to keep pace with new threats and new technologies that get combined and integrated?
That's a really great question. I think it's a concern for a lot of cybersecurity practitioners. And first and foremost, when you are defining it, you need to define the outcomes. You need to define what you want to protect. You want to define who is responsible for what. So understanding the stakeholders and the responsibilities. Then you need to assess risks for the business. And when you say the assess risk is what is a business risk, what is a technological risk, inherent risk, and what are the critical assets to support those business risks and those business processes. I mean, business processes do have their risks, and there are tools and processes around it. And then you do leverage the technical controls that you are going to put on top of that. And the other part is, once everything is in place, you need to train the staff. You need to build a culture across the organization, and you need to stay informed because you just mentioned things are getting faster and picking up, and there are new things and new trends coming up.
Coming back to you, Alexandra, what are the common pitfalls and mistakes that organizations make when they're introducing new tech platforms in the cybersecurity area?
Underestimating the complexity of what you're about to introduce to your environment, and also inadequate user training and adoption, right? So this kind of comes back to what I first said with planning. You need to have thorough planning, and you need to have clear communication with everybody that's involved. One of the best practices that we can suggest is do a pilot testing, right? Do a pilot testing, identify any potential issues early on in the process, right? And then regularly review and adjust your implementation plan based on feedback, based on changing circumstances, right? And then make sure that it's a living and breathing implementation, right?
So if we go back and think of how monolithic applications and SAPs and key users and the network of champions, cybersecurity is going down that same path.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because when we talk about stakeholder engagement, right, as Nuno mentioned before, and you also mentioned, and I think regulations nowadays are putting that statement across very clearly with adding a lot of, penalties or putting skin into the game for management layers that usually didn't really had that a couple of years back.
Now you see malus in the business. Back to you, Nuno. Let's go again looking at the theoretical aspect that drives the operational aspect. So what would be key elements that would help build up a robust cybersecurity policy?
Well, the first one is start with the basics. Define what you want to get out of that policy, what you want to protect, which scope and responsibilities, because that engages stakeholders. And having the responsibilities to stakeholders brings accountability. The other part is, and Alexandra was mentioning this on the previous question, which was regulations. Regulations are bringing a lot of skin into the game. They're bringing new stakeholders into the game, and they are making sure that you have a better alignment from the top level. And an important part is also plan for failure. If you plan for failure, you will know what to do in case when something happens, when something goes wrong, and that's an important part. Resilience is something that is being very talked about. And train, measure, audit, and enforce the policies, whatever policies you are setting in place. If you don't have a way to enforce them, it will not be effective at the end of the game.
What I'm coming out of it with is the teams from yesterday making up the squad defining the processes and the frameworks are no longer the teams today. They're expanding.
It's expanding, and we are seeing new stakeholders around the top level, around the legal, around the around finance,
manufacturing stepping up with all the plants and
exactly. That definitely is being a lot broader in encompassing.
Good. We've been engaged across several customers constantly on projects and consultancy. If we were to target a customer and one of our projects to configure and deploy a new cybersecurity solution or a platform, what made it successful? What was appreciated by the customer in that?
I think one of the main things we hear, or one of the key feedback we hear from our customers, is that we sit down and we plan with them. It's about that co-creation and that partnership from the beginning. If I were to think of a recent example, we were actually working with one of our long-term customers or partners, actually, to be honest, at this point, where they needed to replace their vulnerability management solution, right? The one that they had, they felt that the implementation way back was not properly done. They didn't have proper documentation. They didn't know exactly what components were out there. So for them, because they have a very big environment, sitting down and mapping all of that, so they simply didn't have the manpower, and they just wanted to kind of
clean slate.
Exactly, clean slate, just go with the new tech. And after they selected it, we talked a little bit and we started to build the architecture together to kind of do the low-level design, also the high-level design, and see how the future state is going to look like. So I would say that key factors for success are definitely detailed mapping, right, of what you currently have and what you want to achieve. Like I said, clear end goals. A phased implementation to minimize downtime. This was not a greenfield scenario, right? They already had that in the environment, so you couldn't just go in and
tear it all down at the same time with the new solution.
Exactly.
Back to Nuno. You're the one that keeps an eye out, right, on what's happening on the market, and you're also the one that talks to a lot of our customers and finding out what they think. Based on all of the emerging trends in cybersecurity, what makes you anxious and what makes them anxious, right? What's next? How should everybody prepare for what's coming?
It's a great question. There are new challenges around the remote access to organizations. We have seen, for instance, not long ago, a lot of the national cybersecurity centers recommending, for instance, that you don't use so much SSL VPNs, and people are looking for alternatives to that to keep that in a safe, in a secure way. So we are seeing people looking at different trends across the board. Cloud security is still an issue. People still going through the cloud, still worry about how to secure their cloud assets. And on top of technical trends, then you do also have the regulatory challenges, which are bringing things around data privacy, about cyber resilience, about the convergence of OT and IT when you're looking through that. And the need for training and awareness, because you have new stakeholders in there. So that is something that is also part of what people are worrying. And for organizations, this brings needs to reassess what they are doing, to evaluate their controls in more proactive way, to test them again, to understand the gaps of where they are, and definitely to stay informed, learn new things, and encourage peer collaboration.
We've mentioned a lot of stakeholder mapping, a lot of planning, a lot of adoption. Let's focus on adoption, right? Everything we introduce in an environment needs rollout, it needs user training, and it needs adoption at process level, maybe at technology level. They're interacting with the things. What are some best practices in that area?
That's a very good question, and actually, you would be surprised how many, let's say, security tools. Fail because users cannot work with the tool, right? Even if we're talking here about IT teams, like the ones that are consuming them, or if you're actually talking about the regular users, like in the finance department or HR department, etc., right? So it's very, very important to develop, first and foremost, clear and easy to understand training materials whenever you're doing any sort of technology rollout, and to tailor those materials for the type of user.
Different pockets, personas within the organization.
Exactly. What we've also seen, and it has worked for us, is to also do interactive trainings, right? Because oftentimes people will have questions, right? They need to understand how that's going to impact them, how they need to work with the tool, what's expected of them, if anything at all, right? So it's good to have those interactive sessions instead of just sending out the general training for everybody to use. And also, it's good to have ongoing support channels, either if you're putting out their online recorded sessions, either if you're using the help desk for that, you create a knowledge base article, you give it to the help desk, and they're there to kind of fend off any sort of questions that happen afterwards.
And expanding FAQ sort of thing.
Exactly. And it's good that you mentioned FAQ, right? Because user feedback is also important, right? For us, right, it's easy to talk in technical terms. It's natural
really
for us to understand these technologies, but oftentimes for the user, it's not. Like, it's a whole new universe for them.
Fully agree with that one.
Thank you, Gabi.
So coming back to you and the big bad wolf in the room with the regulatory compliance, right? And all the pressure coming back on the business nowadays with whatever is getting introduced. What sort of strategic considerations might be essential for some of the organizations to have in mind, right? To get to green, to get to the regulatory compliance?
I think there's a lot of people looking at it in a more complex way than it necessarily needs to be.
Okay.
I think it's the new regulations that are coming, a lot of them, what they are bringing into the same umbrella is things that were already there. We were discussing how cybersecurity is an always evolving thing. Regulations are an evolvement of the things that were already there in many cases. So one part of the organizations need to understand first, what do they need to comply with? Some organizations, they have presence in multiple countries with multiple regulations. That's important to understand where they are. The US has new regulations, Europe has NIS2 and DORA coming in. So depending a little bit where your sector is and what your organization's size and scope is,
your checklist is longer or shorter.
Exactly. So that's one. The second one is use that as an opportunity to review and improve your current cybersecurity, because you're going to be, most of organizations are going to already have a lot of those things in place. If you're a global organization, it can be useful to engage with a global partner such as Stefanini.
Did you also see a bit more crowdfunding within organizations, as in all the budgets that were secured for only cybersecurity, only IT ops and the business? Now there's a lot of moving parts to make sure that they're sufficient.
And that's a great point, because that cross-functional communication that I was telling, that siloed approach is becoming less siloed, because as you grow, as you go up in the organization, you also get a more helicopter view, and you can also look at cross-functional synergies that you do have to the organization, cross-functional challenges, because if you're doing application security, that ties up into cybersecurity, right? If you are doing cloud security and you have the cloud folks, all of a sudden they can have the cybersecurity teams coming up and have a discussion, and not open and honest discussion, and align where the budget should be allocated, because some
shift resources, shift time, shift focus,
and align all of those things. So that definitely is something that we are seeing, because it gives a new perspective in some of those engagements, and with also external partners, because sometimes they can work with external partners in multiple areas, and some partners, Stefanini is an example, can give that into multiple areas as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Alexandra, Nuno, for this very insightful discussion. Many interruptions. I'm sorry for that, but key points needed to be made. We'll see each other again in the near future with another edition. See you.
Thank you, Gabi.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.